Hey, what's up, everybody? Hope you're having a great day. My name is Jay, and you're watching Cloud Reactions. I'm sorry, something's in my throat. I don't know what it is. It's got me choking, though. We just got done listening to The Price of a Mile, and let's see if my initial thoughts are correct. I want to know whether I got it right or wrong. The title of this one actually was mentioned. Looks like they did give us a little info. I just didn't catch it. But let's go ahead and find out. It's the Battle of Passchendaele. Let's find out what happened here. Stop talking. Let's just hop right on in.
Joachim, what is the price of a mile?
I'll tell you, Indy. In a while.
That's not artist in him. He's got a rhyme. I thought they were gonna do like something epic with that. Then it got all slow and sad. I'm like, oh damn it.
The Ypres salient in 1917 was a dismal place. Since the first battle for the city in late 1914, the whole area had been caught in the stalemate of trench warfare. Whole local villages in no man's land simply ceased to exist. The Germans held the high ground in a half circle around the British positions in front of Ypres, their artillery observers ever watchful. Much of the plains in this region of Belgium, Flanders, was reclaimed bog and marshland that usually lay below sea level and could only be cultivated with the help of a network of drainage ditches. After 3 years of war, though, that system was destroyed, and the whole area turned again into a swamp once the autumn rains began. In the gravelly soil, the Germans could not dig their typical deep trench systems, as the heavy clay would quickly become a quagmire when it rained. Instead, they dotted the landscape with strong points, reinforced pillboxes, and ferro-concrete bunkers, and just sat tight. The Allies, in general, were in pretty serious peril in the summer of 1917. The French were wavering after mutiny, and the Russians hard-pressed after a revolution and the danger of another one. And it was up to British Commander Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig to take the pressure off of both. After a stunning victory at Messines Ridge on the right shoulder of Ypres, Haig had thought it possible to push the Germans off Passchendaele Ridge and get an excellent starting point for a decisive offensive. On July 16th, the British bombardment began. From more than 3,000 heavy guns, a hailstorm of fire rained down on the German lines all over the salient. The artillerymen systematically targeted every grid on their map, leaving only death and destruction in their wake. The German soldiers in the shallow forward trenches were obliterated, and only those lucky enough to take shelter in the bunkers escaped the shrapnel-filled air. Whole woods around the salient were blasted down, and only what I guess you'd call a moonscape of shell holes and tree stumps reaching out of the ground like skeletal fingers remained. Then, after 2 weeks of bombardment, on July 31st, the advance began. But instead of a frenzy...
I can see why the last video was mentioned to do the fan-made video, because the fan video pretty much got the landscaping of this battlefield pretty close, pretty damn close. Just bog, dirt, rain, bush, broken down trees. Like, that video really captured it. I'm seeing this and it's direct, just taking me right back to the video.
On July 31st, the advance began. But instead of a frenzied rush over the parapets, the attack slowed to a crawl. It was like trying to cross a freshly plowed field. The soldiers' boots got stuck in the dirt, slipping and stumbling through the bombed-out ground. It was slow and it was exhausting, as they carried 80 pounds of equipment each, with things like entrenching tools, grenades, and ammunition. Still, the first attack made rather promising headway towards Plickem Ridge and Westhook, capturing the first German lines. The men cleared the trenches and dugouts while capturing many miserable and shell-shocked German soldiers. British command judged...
I wonder if the soldiers, not just the Germans, but just in general, especially if you're shell-shocked, you're just willing to do anything just to get the hell out of there. I wonder, are you relieved or not when you're captured? You know? Because in a sense, the war is over for you. At the same time, are you gonna become a prisoner of war, or are they just gonna like line you up and then just shoot you, send you off to some camp somewhere, use you as manual labor, throw you in a jail cell? Like, what is your options from then on out? But I wonder, because shell shock is a real thing, and I've seen some documentaries on it. They probably feel more relieved if they are captured, you know, because then at least in their head it's over, it's done, finally. Man, war can really messes up the psyche.
Capturing the first German lines. The men cleared the trenches and dugouts while capturing many miserable and shell-shocked German soldiers. British command judged from the first reports that a breakthrough might be imminent and that the capture of Passchendaele Ridge itself was to be within grasp. However, what they had conquered so far was really only a few forward positions and machine gun outposts. The Germans had abandoned the traditional system of trench lines and instead focused on a convoluted defense-in-depth system that went on for miles. So, as the British soldiers ventured on, they suddenly found themselves under well-directed fire from camouflage strongpoints, hidden pillboxes, and snipers. They had, in fact, just entered the kill zone. The first waves were mown down or found themselves soon isolated from the rest of their units. When the early days of August passed, the weather suddenly began to change. The sky darkened with clouds and a thick mist descended over the area. It began to rain, and not just a little, but a torrential downpour, and it did not stop for days. The steady downpour soaked the whole area. Every man and every gun was soon drenched, and the ground softened to an ugly quagmire of mud and clay. The swamp returned early this year. On the battlefield, all sense of direction was immediately lost. The terrain had changed so much that old maps, even recent maps, were useless.
I was gonna say, no matter what direction you look, it all looks the same. So there's no landmarks, nothing, no buildings, and probably no pathways, no streets. You look around, you look at a map, and then you look around you, it's just all the same in every direction for God knows how long in diameter. Radius, diameter, like who knows? Like, the only way to figure out where they are is just to walk directly one way and then see if the map matches up with anything beyond all that hell. Dang.
Between the skeletal woods and the gas-soaked shell holes, there was nothing on which to orientate yourself.
Freedom is the purpose.
It was an extraordinary panorama, half frightening, half
heavy
exciting.
price.
Everywhere, as far as you could see, there were spurts of earth from shells bursting, and bursts of shrapnel and high explosives, and men looking like ants in the distance. You couldn't speak. The gunfire was so terrific. But you don't really hear the explosions individually. You just see them going off like geysers shooting up in the air. As far as you could see in front of you and to either side, there was nothing but mud, mud, mud for miles, and just a few stumps of trees here and there. And all hell let loose all around you. The stretcher bearers had
Corporal, Queens, Westminster Rifles.
Here and there. And all hell let loose all around you. The stretcher bearers had it especially hard. Down to their waists in the morass and the mud. Each step was exhausting. It took 4 to 6 men to carry one stretcher.
Dang.
And even small distances could take hours to cover. And at night, it was simply impossible to evacuate the wounded because of the danger of getting lost or stuck in the mud.
Wow.
Many wounded died waiting for the morning
I was
to
gonna
come.
say.
The Germans shared their misery, and it is reported that there was an unspoken rule to not fire on the stretcher parties. Lying wounded in the swamp was a terrible fate. Then there was a lull in the shelling. And through the machine gun slit on the back wall of the pillbox, we heard this terrible kind of gurgling noise. It was the wounded, lying there sinking, and this liquid mud burying them alive, running over their faces, into their mouth and nose.
Dang.
We had to keep heaving the duckboards up and trying to put some other stuff underneath, just so that the fellows wouldn't sink so much. We could not understand why, in the name of God, anyone had ordered an attack like that over terrain like that. It was impossible. The heavier guns sank deeper into the ground each time they fired, and the men had to abandon the safety of their trenches as they filled up to their armpits with water. Engineers tried to bridge the flooded shell holes with pontoons, wooden walkways. However, those duckboards soon became haunting image of the Passchendaele campaign. There was this constant fear of falling off and drowning in the morass, which was the fate of any soldier carrying his load who did so. The dead often simply disappeared in the mud, never to be seen again. 42,000 such bodies were never recovered at all. In a way, it was mud didn't stick you down. When it yielded under your feet, you knew that it was a body you were treading on. It was terrible. 1,000 such bodies were never recovered at all. In a way, it was worse when the mud didn't stick you down. When it yielded under your feet, you knew that it was a body you were treading on. It was terrifying. You would tread on the stomach, perhaps, and it would grunt all of the air out of its body.
Oh my God.
It made your hair stand on end. The smell could make you vomit, and you could always tell whether it was a dead Jerry or a dead Tommy. The Germans smelt different in death.
Wow.
It rained nearly all August long, one of the wettest months in local history. Without the ability to bring the heavy guns forward, the battles usually came down to small group actions. British battle groups and German counterattacks clashed with light machine guns and hand grenades in chaotic and confusing skirmishes without much cohesion or tactical finesse. As August came to a close, tens of thousands of men had already lost their lives. Some places had changed hands a dozen times, and whole map points were eradicated. The British forces were exhausted, and it passed to the Australians, South Africans, and New Zealanders to slowly grind away at the German defenses, which were in turn manned by exhausted, tired, and dirty men for weeks on end. Everybody was miserable and filled with frustration. When elite units from the Anzacs met with the Prussian Guards, there were no prisoners taken. So far, more than 100,000 Allied casualties had paid for the advance of 3.5 miles. But they could not remain in the swamp. By winter, they had to push the Germans off the main
3.5 miles.
in the swamp. By winter, they had to push the Germans off the main ridge or pull back to their starting positions. But this could only be achieved by throwing more lives against the German defenses. The fighting for Zonnebeke and the men in road had eventually turned the salient around. And by the end of September, it was the Germans who were getting surrounded. The new tactic by General Herbert Plumer to bite into the German defenses and hold limited objectives proved successful against German counterattacks. And with the weather clearing up, the heavy artillery could finally be brought up in support. But the German center was still strongly held. The British had no choice but to prepare for the final push, no matter the cost. By mid-October, and tens of thousands of more casualties later, there was only a small way to go to Passchendaele itself. Haig intended to bring in the Canadian and French forces for the final push. But the commanding Canadian general, Arthur Currie, took one hard look at the battlefield and said that his men would not attack until everything was prepared as favorably as possible. Haig had little choice but to agree, and they began preparing the battlefield and stocking up on artillery shells. What followed was another month of murderous bombardment and fierce fighting in a nightmarish environment. It was a long, hard slog up Passchendaele Ridge, and the casualties were enormous. Still, with the Canadians at the fore, the Allies gradually pushed onwards, duking it out against the stubborn German defenders, both sides trading lives for ground. In the end, the Germans had no working answer for the British bite-and-hold tactics, and were gradually pushed off their defenses. The village of Passchendaele itself was unrecognizable. It was simply bombed out of existence. The battle officially ended on November 10th, as the final important high ground was captured, although smaller fighting would still go on November 10th, as the final important...
Wow, that's a thumbnail right there. Holy smokes. Wow, it's all gone. It's all gone.
although smaller fighting would still go on the rest of the year. The ultimate number of casualties that had vanished in the mud during the battle for Passchendaele Ridge is still unknown. It is realistic to say that at least 500,000 men from both sides had paid for the ground of 6 miles. So the price of each mile is over 80,000 men. 80,000. The name Passchendaele will forever speak of a terrible battle, of incredible hardship and incredible suffering. And that is something on which everyone can agree.
Young men are dying, they pay the price. Oh, how they suffer. So tell me, what's the price of a man?
500,000. 500,000. What's the point? Like, what did we gain? All these resources, all these men, and for what? For like, wow, all those lives, and you gained nothing. You gained no ground. Yeah, they're definitely right. Sun Tzu would have been hella pissed. In that instance, you can truly say, what was the cost? What was the point, really? 6 miles of land? 6 miles of land. Ugh. Hey, man. Well, hope you guys enjoy the reactions. I certainly enjoyed the video. I always enjoy learning the history behind each battle, each video. Anyways, hope you guys enjoy your guys' day. Stay safe, stay blessed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.